My name is Margot Calloway, and I am 43 years old, and I want to tell you about the Easter Sunday where my mother-in-law slid a manila envelope across the dinner table and told me it would be best for the whole family if I added her name to my daughter's college savings account. I want to tell you about the way she said it. Church potluck voice, Easter lilies on the table going slightly brown at the edges, my husband looking at his fork like it contained the answer to a question he'd been too careful to actually ask. And I want to tell you about what my son had in the inside pocket of his navy jacket when he walked through that door after a 4-hour drive from Pittsburgh. Something flat and substantial that I noticed when he hugged me and didn't ask about. And I want to tell you that by the time the peach cobbler was cold and the mimosas sat flat in their flutes, $22,000 had been named at a dinner table. A dead man had spoken, and a woman who had spent over a decade standing slightly behind her own instincts had finally run out of reasons to stay there. If you're new here, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any part of what's coming. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read all of them, and on a story like this one, I need to know I'm not telling it into the dark. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia, in a house with uneven floors, a boiler that needed convincing every November, and a father named Walter Pritchard who could fix anything that had a mechanical explanation and refused to give up on anything that didn't. Walter was not a man who said "I love you" in those specific words. He said it by showing up in the driveway before you woke up to replace your wiper blades before a storm, by tucking $20 bills into birthday cards that always arrived before the day, by making scrambled eggs every Sunday and setting a plate in front of you without asking who wanted what, because he already knew and had already decided that knowing was the least he owed you. My mother left when I was 11. She cleaned out her closet on a Thursday, and I found out on a Friday when I went to borrow a sweater and found wire hangers swinging in the cold. My father was in the kitchen making eggs. He had his back to the doorway, and his shoulders were set in a particular way. Not collapsed, not rigid, just purposeful. And I understood from that, from the set of his back on a February Friday morning in Morgantown, West Virginia, that we were not going to be the kind of family that came apart over this. That whatever was coming next, we were going to build through it. He never said that. He didn't have to. I got myself to college on Pell Grants and work study and a part-time job at a physical therapy clinic, where I spent 4 years watching the licensed therapists work before I had the credential to do it myself, learning every single movement and counter-movement, every compensatory pattern, every way a body will route around a wound to get through the day. I paid off my last student loan at 34. I never asked anyone to carry something that was mine to carry. By the time I was 31, I was the lead PT at Allegheny Sports and Spine in Morgantown, treating post-surgical patients and high school athletes and the occasional amateur runner who needed someone to tell them directly which of their habits was the actual problem. I am good at my job. I say that not to impress you, but because I think it matters to the story, that there is a place in my life where no one questions whether I know what I'm doing, where my competence is simply the assumed starting point of every interaction, and that the contrast between that place and my husband's family's dining room table over 12 years has been a thing I could never quite make fit inside the same sentence. I started Owen's college savings account when he was 2 years old. I started Becca's when she was 2. Automatic transfer on the 1st of every month, the way my father had shown me you build things. Quietly, consistently, without needing an audience for it. There's something I should mention here, something small that I didn't understand the weight of when it happened. My father had personal stationery, thick, cream-colored paper, his initials at the top in navy blue, W.E.P., Walter Eugene Pritchard. One Thanksgiving, a year before his diagnosis, he slipped a folded note on that stationery into my purse while I was putting my coat on, and I didn't find it until Monday morning at my desk. It said, "You built this. Don't forget." I kept it next to my computer at work. The spring before he got sick, he'd mentioned, twice, that he was putting some thoughts on paper for me, things he wanted me to have in writing. I told him there was no rush. We had time. We did not, it turned out, have as much time as I thought, and the letter he promised never arrived, and I had been waiting for 8 months when Easter came around, telling myself I had probably misremembered, that grief does that he probably just meant the note he'd already given me, and by then I had mostly made myself stop thinking about it, because the waiting had become another version of the tired. Owen arrived that Easter morning with a 4-hour drive behind him and a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long. He was in his first year at Pitt, pre-law, partial scholarship, the rest coming from the fund I'd started the year he was born. And he looked like himself, but also like someone carrying something he hadn't decided how to put down yet. I noticed his jacket pockets, the ordinary weight of a phone and wallet on the right side, and on the left side something flat and substantial, the kind of bulk a thick envelope makes. I let it go. I was focused on getting plates to the table. I had been existing inside a low-grade alertness for months that had become invisible to me, the body's version of a smoke alarm with a dying battery. Always going, always in the background, so constant you stop interpreting it as a warning. Here is what I need you to understand about Devon's parents before I tell you about the envelope. Nadine and Gerald Calloway have a language that took me years to hear clearly, because on the surface, it is not a language of cruelty. Nothing you can isolate in a single sentence and hold up and say that one was the thing. It lives in the pivot, in the story about someone else who'd been more generous, the soft redirect to what a daughter-in-law in the church group had done for her husband's family. The comment that lands just left of center, so that if you say, "ouch," she can tilt her head and ask if you're all right, if you're maybe just tired. You seem a little tired lately. I had been standing slightly behind my own instincts for 12 years in that family, adjusting my register so that nothing I said could be framed as an accusation. Nothing I declined could be framed as a refusal, making myself just small enough that no one had to choose between me and their comfort. I was tired of it. I had been tired of it for a long time. I just had not found the word for it yet. It was when the dessert plates were being moved to the sideboard, Renata carrying 2 at once, her youngest trying to help and making things complicated, that Nadine set a manila envelope next to my water glass. She said she and Gerald had been wanting to talk about something they'd been praying over, something they believed would be best for the whole family going forward. And Gerald nodded in the particular way of a man who has been given lines he memorized but doesn't fully understand. Devon was looking at his fork. I listened to all of it. Secondary account holder, both children's education savings accounts. Just for safety, just in case. Families support each other. You never know what can happen. And wouldn't it be a comfort to everyone to know that the children were taken care of no matter what? And when she finished, I said, quietly, "The way you say something when you have known the answer for longer than the question has been asked. That both accounts required dual authorization for any change. Dual meaning both me and Devon, both signatures. And that I was happy to discuss it with Devon privately when we had a moment." I picked up my water glass. I heard the quality of the silence in the room change. I did not look at Nadine's face. I did not have to. But I was aware, in the way you're aware of a door that is finally clicked shut, that I had just walked out of that sentence with something I had walked into it without. In the days after Easter, Nadine got to work. I know this because Devon's sister Renata called me on a Thursday, 2 weeks later, and said she had heard from their mother that I had reacted badly to a family conversation, that I had been cold, that I had made things uncomfortable, that she was worried about me. Renata told me this the way you tell someone about a car coming up fast in their rear view, uncertain whether to mention it, doing it anyway. I thanked her. I kept my voice even. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen for a while, looking at the refrigerator magnets that Becca had collected from every state she'd ever visited. And I thought about how 12 years ago I had believed that if I just kept being reasonable, kept being the person in the room who did not escalate, kept offering the benefit of the doubt one more time and then one more time after that, eventually the language would change. I thought about how exhausting it was to have been that wrong for that long. I should tell you, because the story doesn't make full sense without it, that 8 months before that Easter, my father had died. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end, the way it goes with that particular thing. And I had been at his bedside in Morgantown for the last 4 of them. He had told me twice that he was putting something in a letter for me, things he'd been thinking about for years, things he wanted me to have in his handwriting. He mentioned the cream stationery. He mentioned his initials. He said he had already sent it. I told him I would keep an eye for it, and then he was gone, and the letter never arrived, and I spent the first month assuming it had gotten lost in the mail because things do, occasionally, and the second month starting to wonder if I had misremembered. And by month 6, I had stopped waiting for it and started filing it away under the category of things I had wanted that hadn't come through, which was a category I had some experience managing. I went to work. I treated a 47-year-old man's torn Achilles and a 16-year-old soccer player's sprained ankle, and I was precise and thorough, and I did not think about Easter lunch while I was working, because work was the one place where no one slid an envelope next to my water glass and called it love. One afternoon in the parking lot before my afternoon shift, I started my car and the radio came on to a station it had drifted to, playing something I didn't recognize, and the cleaning product smell from the dashboard, one of those little tree air fresheners the previous owner had left attached to the vent, was the exact same smell as the stuff my father used on his car. That particular synthetic pine that shouldn't have meant anything and meant everything. And I sat in that parking lot for 9 minutes before I could make myself go in. I am telling you that because I want you to know what the months between Easter and the discovery actually felt like. Not elegant, not composed. 9 minutes in a parking lot in Morgantown because of a pine-scented air freshener. That is the actual texture of it. What I did not let myself do was reach out to the Callaways and start a conversation I didn't have the evidence to finish. I had screenshots of nothing. I had a feeling, a 12-year accumulation of a feeling, and a manila envelope I had outmaneuvered at a dinner table, and the weight of my son's jacket pocket that I was turning over in my mind without knowing why. What I found, accidentally, on a Tuesday night when I was going through our shared household email to sort a billing dispute, was an email chain. Devin had forwarded it to himself from his parents' account over a year earlier. He had meant to delete it, he told me later, and had not. It was 14 months long. Nadine and Gerald, in their particular language, never direct, always framed as concern, spending 14 months applying soft pressure on Devin to add them to the children's education accounts before something happens, before Margot isn't in a position to manage things, before you find yourself in a situation where you wished you'd been more careful. God forbid anything should happen to Margot. That phrase appeared 4 times in 14 months, each time just slightly different, each time carrying the same weight. I photographed each email on my phone, one by one, methodically. I saved them to a folder I named simply April. I did not say anything to Devin that night. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and listened to him sleep, and thought about the word careful, and how it could be used to mean protection, and how it could be used to mean the opposite, and which one Nadine had meant, and how she would never have to answer that question directly, because she had never said anything directly in 45 years of marriage to a man who nodded when she told him to. Owen called on a Saturday in the middle of March. He had gone home to Morgantown for spring break, and spent a few days helping his grandparents sort through a spare room they wanted to repurpose. He had been cleaning out Nadine's writing desk, the old mahogany one in the sitting room, the one with the decorative brass handles, clearing out the second drawer. He described finding it carefully, the way he described things when he was being precise. A cream-colored envelope, thick paper, his grandfather's monogram on the return address. W.E.P. His mother's full name and his grandfather's handwriting on the front. A postmark from 8 months ago. The envelope had been opened. He could see the original gummed seal had been parted cleanly, the way you do it with a letter opener, and resealed with a piece of transparent tape that had gone slightly yellowish with time. Owen was quiet when he finished describing it. I was quiet on my end for a moment. My hands had gone very still in the way they do when I am sorting something complex and need everything else to stop moving. I asked him where he was. He said he had taken it outside before he called me, that he was sitting in his grandparents' driveway. I asked him if Nadine knew he'd found it. He said he thought so. He had held it up and she had said, without meeting his eyes, that she must have set it aside, meaning to send it on, and forgot. He said she said it very quickly. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about a woman who receives certified mail with someone else's name on it during a period when she has a spare key to their house. I thought about a letter opener. I thought about transparent tape. I asked Owen if he would bring the letter to the next family gathering. He said yes without asking why. He asked if I was all right. I said I was better than I'd been in 8 months, which was the truest thing I'd said out loud in a long time. And then I told him I loved him, and we hung up, and I sat very still in my kitchen for a while. And something that had been sitting low and cold in my chest for 8 months shifted, very slightly, toward something else. In the 2 weeks between that phone call and the next family gathering, I did 2 things that were practical, and 1 thing that was simply necessary. The first practical thing, I called an estate attorney, not a family friend, not someone connected to the Callaways in any way, but a woman named Patricia I had found through my clinic's HR department, who specialized in family financial disputes. I sat in her office for 1 hour. She confirmed, in language that left nothing interpretable, that both education savings accounts were structured such that no changes, withdrawals, or additional account holders could be added without both my signature and Devin's, full stop, and that any attempt to contest that structure without a court order would require Devin's active cooperation, which meant that any vulnerability I had was, in fact, Devin, and not the accounts themselves. She also confirmed that my father's inheritance, held in a separate individual account in my name only, was entirely unreachable through my marriage under West Virginia law, unless I chose otherwise. I had not known this with precision. I knew it the way you know things you've felt but haven't verified. Sitting in that office with the sun coming through the Venetian blinds and Patricia's coffee going cold between us, I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not known was braced. The second practical thing, I called Roselle, my father's sister. I told her Owen had found the letter in Nadine's desk, and that I was bringing it to the next gathering. There was a pause on her end, and then she said, "I wondered where it went." She said it the way you say something you have been sitting with for a long time, waiting for someone to open the door to. She said she had been with my father when he mailed it, that she had driven him to the post office herself because he was already too weak to drive, that she had watched him hand it to the window clerk certified mail. She said she had been trying to understand for 8 months how a certified letter could simply not arrive. I asked her if she would come to the gathering. She said she would drive herself. The one thing that was simply necessary. I went to Owen's room. He was home for spring break, sleeping late the way he'd been sleeping late since he was 15. And I sat on the edge of his bed, and I told him his grandfather would have been proud of him. He opened one eye and said he knew. He went back to sleep. I let him. I was not anxious in the days before the gathering the way I had expected to be. I was very quiet inside, the particular quiet of a woman who has finished deciding. I had been deciding for 12 years, in small increments, each one too small to be named, each one adding to a total I hadn't been tracking until the number was already large. I was done. The gathering was smaller than Easter, just immediate family and Roselle, who I had told Devin I was inviting and who he had not objected to, perhaps because he was already carrying something and was relieved, quietly, to have a witness present who was not his. At a coffee that happened 2 days before the gathering, Devin's brother Hal stopped by the house, as he sometimes did, because he and Devin had a running Saturday morning routine of coffee and arguing about football. I said, in the kitchen, while refilling cups, that I had been talking to Patricia about restructuring a few of the family's financial accounts, just cleaning things up, updating beneficiary language, normal maintenance. I said it neutrally, the way you say things that are true and don't require elaboration. Hal nodded. Gerald, who had come along that morning because Nadine had somewhere to be, was at the counter getting more coffee. He stopped pouring. I watched it in my peripheral vision, the very slight stillness of a man who just heard something he didn't expect. I did not look at him. I poured Hal's coffee. I mentioned that Patricia was thorough and I would recommend her to anyone. The day of the gathering, Owen put the envelope in his inside jacket pocket before we left the house. I saw him do it. He didn't say anything, and I didn't ask. We drove to the Calloway house in 2 cars because Becca had rehearsal in the morning, and I had needed to pick her up, and we arrived separately from Devin, who had gone ahead. The table was set the same way it always was. Nadine kept the same tablecloth regardless of the occasion, the same candles in the same holders, the same arrangement of plates. Roselle arrived 8 minutes after we did, in her dark green linen blazer, and she hugged me at the door in the way she had been hugging me since I was 11, like she had decided early on that I was worth the full embrace, and nothing had changed her mind. We sat down. Gerald made conversation about a neighbor's fence line. Devin talked to Hal about the drive. Becca was on her phone. Owen was quiet in the particular way of someone who is holding something and has decided not to rush it. There was a moment, about 40 minutes in, during the main course, when Nadine asked me, brightly, if I had given any more thought to the conversation from Easter, whether Devin and I had had a chance to discuss things, and I said that we had, and that we had some questions about the account structure, and that I'd actually spoken to an estate attorney about it last week. I said Patricia's name. I said she was very knowledgeable. Nadine smiled her church potluck smile and said that sounded very sensible. Gerald looked at the center of the table. When the plates were being cleared for dessert, Owen reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed the envelope on the table in front of his grandmother. He said, clearly and without any particular emphasis, that he had found it in her writing desk during spring break and that he thought his mother should have it. He pushed it across the tablecloth. It was a cream-colored envelope, thick paper, WEP in the upper left corner, my name in my father's handwriting on the front, a postmark from 8 months ago. A small piece of clear tape across the flap that had gone slightly yellow with age. I watched Nadine's hand move. It was a very small movement, a slight reach toward the envelope, barely the beginning of a gesture, immediately withdrawn. The kind of thing you do before your conscious mind catches up to your instinct. Roselle saw it. She was sitting directly across the table, and I watched her register it. The slight narrowing around her eyes, the stillness that fell over her face like a shutter coming down. Devin saw it. I know he did because I was watching him, and the color in his face changed in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. I picked up the envelope. I opened it. My father's handwriting, the particular architecture of it, the capital M he'd always made with the third stroke slightly longer than the others, was so familiar that I had to stop for a moment and make myself breathe before I could read. Then I read it aloud. Walter had written it 2 weeks before he entered the hospital for the last time. He wrote that he had received a phone call from Nadine Calloway 3 weeks prior. She had called to share that she was worried about Margot, that Margot had become closed off with Devon's family, that she was concerned the grandchildren were being kept at a distance from their paternal grandparents, and that it might be helpful if Walter, as Margot's father, someone she trusted and listened to, encouraged her to open up the financial side of things a little more, to include the Calloways in ways that would make Devon feel supported. Walter wrote that he was documenting this in a letter because he wanted his daughter to know exactly what had been said and by whom. He wrote that he had spoken to his attorney the following week, and that the inheritance funds were structured to be mine alone and unreachable through my marriage by anyone without my explicit action. He wrote that he had made an additional contribution to Becca's education account, a direct gift to Becca as an individual, not to the household, and he named the amount, $22,000. And then, at the end, in the handwriting I had been missing for 8 months, I see what you carry, and you built it yourself, and I have made sure it is yours. Don't forget. The room was very quiet. I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope and held it in both hands the way you hold something you thought you'd lost. Not tightly, just with the full awareness of what it is. Roselle looked at Nadine across the table. She said, in a voice so quiet it was almost conversational, "I knew he'd mailed it." That was all she said. That was, in fact, all that needed to be said. There is a difference between an accusation and a fact delivered in the presence of witnesses, and Roselle knew this, had known it since long before I did, because she had been watching people like Nadine Calloway her entire life, and she understood that the thing that breaks them is not the confrontation. It is the confirmation, in a room they thought they had managed, by someone who cannot be explained away. Nadine did not cry. She did not stand up. She did not make a speech. Her performance, and I say that not with contempt, but with a specific clinical accuracy, the same accuracy I bring to identifying a compensatory movement pattern in a patient who doesn't realize yet what they're doing, simply ran out of air. Her face did not crumple. It emptied. The particular look of a person who has been managing a story for a long time and has just watched the story end in a room full of the wrong audience. Gerald turned his coffee cup slowly in its saucer. He did not look up. He had known. I believe he had known about the letter, and he had also known that there was nothing he could do about what Nadine had done with it. And he had made the choice, as he had made it many times before, to do nothing. And now he was sitting with the weight of that choice in the only place it had ever belonged, on him. Devon was looking at me, not at his parents, not at the table, at me. And his face had the look of a man who had been standing in a hallway between 2 rooms for years, too long, and has just watched the hallway close. I did not speak to him at the table. I looked at him for a moment, long enough to let him know I had seen his face and what was in it, and then I looked away. I said, to the table in general, that I was glad Roselle had been able to come. I said, to Owen specifically, that I was glad he had made the drive. I picked up my purse. I thanked Nadine for the meal in the voice I had been using at her table for 12 years, not cold, not warm, simply appropriate. And I walked to the door and I went home. What I did not do was make a speech. What I did not do was cry in front of anyone in that room. What I did not do was take the long way around through the moments I'd been saving for 12 years and lay them all out on the table like evidence. The letter had said everything my father needed said, and said it in his own hand in the presence of people who could not now claim they hadn't heard it. There was nothing I needed to add. In the weeks that followed, the calls I expected did not come. Gerald and Nadine did not reach out to apologize. They did not reach out at all, which was, I had learned to recognize, also a kind of answer. The same answer they had been giving for years, dressed up in different clothing. Devin called me the evening after the gathering. He had driven home after staying behind to help clean up, a gesture that in the past would have read as conflict avoidance, and might still have been, but also might have been something else, and I was no longer in the business of assigning the most charitable interpretation without evidence. He sat at the kitchen table, and he said he had known about the email chain. He said he had been copied on it from the beginning and had told himself it was talk, that it would stop, that his parents were getting older and scared, and it would eventually go away on its own. He said he was sorry for allowing me to be in a position where I had to outmaneuver something instead of being protected from it. He said this plainly, without excuses wrapped around the outside of it, and I sat with that for a moment. I want to be clear that I did not immediately feel better when he said it. I want to be clear that I have known since I was 11 years old that an apology is a first step and not a destination, and that what comes after the apology is the part that actually tells you what you're working with. What I said was, I know you know that this is the beginning and not the end of the conversation. He said he knew. We talked for a long time that night, not about Easter, not about the letter, but about the thing underneath. The 12 years of small adjustments I had made in silence, and the 12 years of small choices he had made in the same silence, and the fact that we were both, in different ways, tired of what we had been doing, and neither of us had said so out loud until now. It was not a good conversation the way pleasant conversations are good. It was good the way necessary things are good. Necessary and hard and long overdue. Renata called 3 weeks later. She said she had been on some of those email chains. She had thought it was odd, she said. The phrasing had felt off to her. And she hadn't said anything because she had told herself it wasn't her place. She said she was sorry she hadn't said something. I told her I appreciated the call. That was the whole conversation, and it was enough. You do not need a parade. You need a phone call that tells you who is willing to look at a thing clearly. And Renata gave me that, and I filed it under things I was grateful for. I wrote Becca a letter. Not about the money. She didn't know about the money yet. And when I told her it would be in a different conversation, a careful one, about what it means that someone loved you specifically enough to put your name on something permanent before they died. The letter I wrote her was about her grandfather, the things he had said about her from the time she was born, the particular pride he took in her stubbornness, the way he had called her his best argument for the future, in exactly those words, at her last birthday before the diagnosis. I told her that the watch I wore was his, that the note I kept on my desk at work was his, and that the college fund she was going to use, the full thing, plus what he'd added, was an act of love as specific and direct as any love I had ever seen demonstrated. I left the letter on her desk. I did not make a production of it. About a month after the gathering, on a Sunday morning in May, I was sitting on the back porch with coffee and my father's watch on my wrist, and the yard was doing the particular thing it does in early May in West Virginia. Everything coming up green so fast you can almost watch it. I had the note from my desk in my jacket pocket, the one on the thick cream paper. You built this. Don't forget. And I had the letter in the other pocket. And I was just sitting there, not thinking about anything with great precision, the way you sit sometimes when the body finally believes it's allowed to stop bracing. I turned the watch over on my wrist, face down, the way I always do when I'm thinking, and I said to the yard, quietly, the way you say things when no one is listening but you need the words to exist in the air outside of your head. I got it, Dad. I know it took a while, but I got it. I want to tell you, before I go, that I don't have a clean resolution to offer you. Devin and I are doing the work. The actual, slow, unfilmable work of two people deciding whether the foundation they have is worth rebuilding on. His parents remain his parents, and I remain who I am, and some distances become permanent even when no one announces them officially. But here is what I will tell you. I am 43 years old, and I have never once borrowed someone else's confidence to get through a hard room. I built what I built. I know what it cost. And somewhere in Morgantown, in a filing cabinet in an estate attorney's office, in the terms of an account that bears my daughter's name, in the handwriting of a man who loved me in the language of maintenance and presence and showing up, it is all still there, exactly where he put it, waiting exactly as long as it needed to wait. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've ever sat at a table that wasn't really set for you and smiled because you hadn't yet found the door, leave a comment and tell me. I'm listening. Like this video, share it with someone who's been waiting for their letter, subscribe so you're here for the next one, and I'll see you then.